suci, Dagi jinso yepe sonamki, Rola penche sangye dropasho, Sangye chetan soki chanamla, Chanchu badru dani kyam suci, Dagi jinso yepe sonamki, Rola penche sangye dropasho, Sangye chetan soki chanamla, Chanchu baru dani kyam suci, Dagi jinso yepe sonamki, Rola penche sangye dropasho. Okay, 4 immeasurables here. We don't usually chant it in Tibetan, so maybe
Say it in English.
it might sound a bit if we try to do it. So maybe just say it in English. May all beings be happy
And have the causes of happiness. May they all be free of suffering and its causes. May they all experience supreme joy at all times. May they dwell in great equanimity, free from attachments and aversions.
May all beings
Be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they all be free of suffering and its causes. May they all experience supreme joy at all times. May they dwell in great equanimity, free from attachments and aversions. May all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and its causes. May they all experience supreme joy at all times. May they dwell in great equanimity,
free from attachments
and aversions.
I beseech you to turn the wheel of Dharma,
Of all
foundation and the great vehicle under the common one,
according to beings' aspirations and their capacities. Okay. So, Cesare asked as a subject for today some explanations about a practice of Chenrezig, Chenrezig being the Bodhisattva or the Buddha of compassion. And I would like to first introduce a little bit about this sort of practices with deities, because I think probably in a group at least, individually I don't know, but in the group you have been doing so far only Shine meditation, focusing on breath or on sensations or sounds or, these usual objects of concentration. And the practices with deities come from the background of, in this case, of Tibetan tradition, and are a little, actually in the essence, they're just exactly the same thing as Shine and Haktong or Samatha and Vipassana meditations. But sometimes they might seem a bit strange or a bit different from what you're used, so I think I will say just a few words about this sort of practice. And perhaps starting with, and this is something people often ask when they start to be introduced to the Tibetan meditation with deities, they generally are a bit puzzled because they say, okay, Buddhism is non-theist, there's no God and things like this, so how come suddenly we have to deal with deities? What are they, And they are not deity. We chose to translate like this because the word in Tibetan, Hla, actually has a broader meaning, but means essentially, yes, could be translated as deity. But of course, deity for them probably doesn't have the same meaning as deity for us. And it's not any sort of god or anything like this, like in the Greek Venus or Jupiter or things like this. It has not at all the same meaning. It's not like entities that are dwelling somewhere and that we have to invite and come and make offerings. And even though in the Southerners that's exactly what we do, but this is a way of doing, not necessarily that we believe them to be beings or extraterrestrial beings, for instance, that live in some galaxy and come when we call them, if we are nice and if we are obedient or something like this. So I think one could say, there's many things one could say about deities. It is a vast and deep subject, but to put it in a simple way, and especially if we relate to Chenrezig, we can sort of put it in this way that they are more like ways of being, or sort of pure, what we could call pure emotions or pure feelings that spring out of our Buddha nature. So, for instance, compassion, which is so much valued in Buddhism, our ordinary compassion is always a bit biased. We don't have, as human beings, sort of taken by duality. We have friends and enemies, and perhaps not enemies, because this is already something very built up. I don't think any of us has enemies, otherwise we won't be here. But we have people that we dislike, let's say. Perhaps we don't hate them, but we have some sort of difficulties dealing with them. And so if our friend or someone from our family, our child or mother is in difficulty, we probably feel a little bit different than if it is someone we don't like, or someone we dislike, or someone we consider as an awful person, for instance. I have one friend in Portugal that recently was very upset because he has an awful boss, so this kind of person who is really mean and pushes people around, and he had some heart attack or something, and my friend was very upset because he said, somehow, deep down, I felt that he had what he deserves. And then he said, this is not Buddhist at all. So he was really upset with himself for for feeling like that. But that's it. I mean, we are human beings, and even if we don't like to feel this sort of, biased feeling, if we are truly honest, that's what happens sometimes. So our compassion exists potentially. We do feel like we would like to relieve people from their suffering and so on, but it's not totally equal. It's not a totally pure feeling, because there's lots of other things involved. We feel one way towards certain people and a different way towards others. We feel one way towards ourselves and in a different way towards other people around us. And also, sorry, and also even sometimes our urge to relieve other people's suffering is very much because we can't stand it. So in a sense, it's for ourselves. It's just because we can't bear to see other people suffering. So it's not in order to relieve their suffering. Well, of course, yes, but it's mainly because it disturbs us. So you see, there's lots of things in our compassion or our love or all these feelings. It's quite mixed up. So, and why is this? Is because actually in the teachings, I think we could sort of condense the Buddhist teachings into this sort of realization or understanding that we all have this, what they say in Buddhism, Buddha nature. But Buddha nature is not like when we say everybody, all the beings have Buddha nature. For many years I thought, like, so it's very visual, Imagine Buddha nature as some small thing that you have in your heart, like a bean or something, ready to sprout, but needs a lot of attention and things like this. Actually, Buddha nature is just exactly what our mind, even our samsaric mind, is based upon. Buddha nature is just the nature of our mind. So, as the nature of our mind, it cannot be separate from our mind or needing to develop or anything like this. It's just hindered. It's something different. It's there, fully there, totally pure, totally loving, totally caring, totally wonderfully compassionate, but it's hindered, or it sort of radiates out of us through all this complexity of concepts, friends, foes, like, don't like, he's suffering, he's not suffering, so he doesn't need my compassion, and all this stuff, So, the Buddhist perspective is that we have this sort of both in us, every time, all the time, every moment, every breathing. Buddha nature is there, and at the same time also duality is there, and mixed emotions are there. So the reason why we have compassion is because our Buddha nature, but the reason why it is so biased is because we have this conceptual idea that us, others, friends, enemies, and so on. So when we speak, but actually compassion, biased compassion, because it is based on ego and it's based on duality, is not a totally pure feeling. It is not totally consistent, or has not the same nature of our Buddha nature. It has been slightly distorted. So if we want to develop true compassion, we have to be a bit careful, because we might be actually developing just a plain attachment. If we try to develop compassion, we will probably, if you're not careful, if you don't have a method, you'll probably be just developing attachment to your friends, and thinking of, if you think about someone you care and you love, and you think that person might be suffering, then you feel a great need to go and help or do something. But then actually, if it's someone else, or someone that you don't know, or someone you don't care so much about, then you won't feel the same way. So in order to be able to be sure that we are uncovering our true nature, we need a perfect example to copy, copycat. To copy, to sort of align with. We human beings are very much, it is very natural for us to align with each other. And we are sort of designed for that. When we stay around someone very, who is always in bad mood or something, after a while we also will be in bad mood, If we are around someone who is very kind and sweet and, very caring, we'll probably after a while also become like that. That's why in most of the Tibetan teachings you find, like I'm thinking about the 37 practices of the Buddhas, one of the first stanzas say you should accompany with nice people, nice people in this sense, good people who have true compassion, and you should avoid negative friends, because it's not because you have to run away from them or not feel compassion for them. It's just because we are beginners, and as beginners we don't have sort of built ourselves yet to be able to be around nasty people without being influenced or, twisted. So, because we have this very natural tuning capacity, what I mean by having an example or having someone who really embodies true compassion is for us to be able to tune with that. Okay? So that's why in the Vajrayana path, meeting the teacher is so important. Meeting a true teacher, someone who has realization, someone who emanates true compassion, unbiased compassion, and also realization of wisdom and everything, is so important because in a way, and in the Tibetan tradition, you sometimes find some people, some disciples, who became realized just by staying around their teacher, There is the case of Naropa and Tilopa, who was two great teachers of the Kagyu tradition. Tilopa was terrible with... Naropa was actually a great scholar. He was head of the Nalanda University or something like that, monastic university, so he was a great scholar. He knew everything about Buddhism, and all the treatises and all the philosophy and everything. So he needed some sort of other kind of training, So once he was in the library of the university, and he was reciting or reading some high treatise of Buddhist philosophy, and as the legend goes, some very ugly woman entered the library and just suddenly and very sharply asked him, "Do you really understand what you're reading?" So that was sort of a shock. Nobody ever, addressed him in such a crude way, And he was startled, and then he started, realizing, looking in a very honest way, say, well, I understand what I'm reading, but I don't experience this. And so he decided to go and find a teacher. And also I think either the woman told him or he had a dream saying that he should look for someone called Tilopa. But he was a Brahmin, and this was a high caste. They are very keen on cleanliness, and purity and things like this. For him it was a whole... I'm not going to tell you the whole story because it was very difficult for him. He met actually Tilopa several times, but he didn't recognize him because he was either in a filthy thing or he was eating fish or, all these sorts of things. Then Tilopa made him go through a lot of experiences, not very easy. And then one day when he was, he had given up all this structure, mental concepts and everything, when Tilopa thought he was ready, he made him make a fire, and then he took out his sandal and he slashed him in the face, so strongly that Naropa fell in the back and he was out for a few minutes, he lost consciousness. Then when he woke up, he was realized. And that happened, of course, he had all this knowledge and everything, but the realization came just by being around Tilopa, He didn't receive a line of teaching, they say, not even once. He had all that, What he needed was something else. So that's what I mean, by being tuned to each other, and if we are tuned with someone, we get around someone who has really this degree of realization that shines through him or her, then we sort of become better ourselves. And it has also the advantage of not going through the mental process. It's a very heart-to-heart sort of connection. But then, of course, being around a teacher, such a high teacher, is not something that we can all manage to do because they don't run around in the tube generally, and they might, but I mean, it's not easy. It would be a great coincidence to come across one of them one day. It might happen, but it's not very easy. And you probably will have to sort of renounce most of the things that constitute your life now, because they generally live in the East, and then they live in Dharma centers, and then it's very difficult to stay around, and you have to have visas and ticket planes and things like this. So, so there is a very practical way, very easy, very cheap, absolutely free, that is to practice Chenrezig, for instance. What I mean is, he actually embodies this awakened and compassionate nature of ours. So the deities are not really external, or they're not entities. They represent, or they also trigger, and they radiate our true and basic goodness. Whether it's Chenrezig or any other deity, they all come from the same place, except they sort of, Chenrezig, for instance, is more into the compassion aspect. If you see Manjushri, for instance, will be more the wisdom aspect, and so on and so forth. Every deity mirrors a certain aspect or quality of this enlightened nature, but in essence, they all we can say they all represent different aspects of this enlightened attitude. So, when we use this type of meditation, what we are actually doing is tuning ourselves into a quality of awareness, of course, and a quality of, in this case, compassion. By example. So that's why we have in front of us, or we tune with. Also, he is not really a human being, which is a good thing. Because if he was someone we know, we might find defaults in him. That's one of the dangers that we have when we meet a human teacher. You know, if we don't see him very often, that's okay. I mean, he comes once a year. We don't see how he lives all the rest of the time, so we are okay. But if we live around all the time, you know, we might find that he is short-tempered or this or that, and then that would, you know, sort of destroy our image. But Chenrezig is sort of spotless. He doesn't have to, you know, do all these things. He doesn't eat. He doesn't go to the toilet. So it's absolutely free of all defects. It's funny, but you know, we in the beginning in the West, I think we were so naive that we had these strange ideas about teachers. Ringo Tuko always tells this story. It didn't quite happen to him, but he says one of his friends was once invited to Europe or to the States, I don't know. Then the people went and picked him up at the airport, and then they brought him to the center, drove him to the center, and then showed him his room. He arrived sort of end of the evening, you know, showed him to this room and then left him alone, you know. So we had also always this idea, I don't want to disturb, so people will know, go out backwards and go down the stairs in the tip of their toes. So he was a bit hungry, but he said, okay, maybe they don't dinner in this country, so he sort of, accept that and went to bed. And then next morning he woke up. He was really lots, these noises in your stomach when you're really hungry. But then nobody was coming, and he didn't know where the dinner, where the dining room was. So he stayed and waited. Finally, someone came and said, "Now it's time for the teaching," you know. So he was like, "Man, okay, now I'm really hungry." So he said, "What about breakfast?" He said. You know, the person, you know, went just white and said, "Oh, you eat." So they were, you know, expecting him not to need such a kind of, you know, gross thing, you know. He was supposed to live on air or sunlight or something like that, like a plant. So it, you know, we have this thing. So sometimes when we meet the teacher, we want him to be absolutely spotless, perfect, like a Superman or a Superwoman. And so we don't have this problem with Chenrezig, because we don't know what he does all the rest of the time when he stops being like this. Maybe he does other things, but we don't know. So, but on the other hand, he is really embodying this sort of quality. And you might say, how can I tune to a quality that perhaps I never met someone so enlightened and so compassionate? Well, the reason why we can tune into that is because we have it. So it's not something that we have to take from outside. This is just a trigger. We're just using this image and whatever it represents as a trigger to awake our compassion, our wisdom. So it's in a way that's what they call, actually Vajrayana is often called, all these techniques and methods are often called skillful means. When you hear this word, you might think, this is not very honest. Skillful means. What do you mean? Yeah, but it's all these methods which are very clever and very skillful to allow us to develop all these qualities. Of course, you can also develop them in the Mahayana style. And the Mahayana style is more through the mind training and, you know, meditation on compassion, meditation on loving kindness and all of this. And you do that by, I think by now you're probably familiar with that. You think about someone who you love, and then you wish him well, and then you start wishing, you let that feeling come, you know, sort of develop in you, and then you bring someone else whom you perhaps love not so much, and like this until you have brought in even your enemies, let's say, until you are totally filled with this feeling of loving kindness, wishing well, and, you know, or compassion or anything else. That's the Mahayana way of doing it. It goes through reasoning, through creating a sort of story or imagining someone you love that is suffering. The Vajrayana way will be tuning, you know, tuning with compassion and wisdom. And it's like tuning a radio. You know, if you want to tune to a certain radio station, you have to know the frequency, right? 84.5. Then you go directly there. So Chenrezig is like that. Is a frequency tuning. You know, instead of searching and within inside yourself, where is compassion? You know, then you tune immediately. If the second you think about this image, once you have created the, you know, neuronal pathway in your brain, the minute you tune with Chenrezig, that minute compassion comes. So this is very skillful. That's why also they say Vajrayana is very quick. I always laugh with that, because after 40 years I don't think it's really so quick, but they say, yeah, it's the quickest path, because it's actually, yes, it's a sort of, how you call this, shortcut. Yeah, it is. It's a shortcut. But it's not instantaneous. You have to build it up. So this sort of connection between Chenrezig and the triggering of this enlightened compassion, the more you practice this, the more you practice it, the more it becomes a real shortcut. And so once you have started with this practice and you are in your daily life, just by the mere fact that you remember Chenrezig or the mantra, we will be going there soon, or the mantra, or anything connected with the practice, you immediately manage to change actually your attitude into something that comes from love instead of from fear. Say. So it is truly a very, very skillful, very intelligent, and also a very deep and profound technique, I might say, to change our emotions. So in a sense we could say that, and it's actually the true meaning of even his name, Chenrezig, or if you want to say it in Sanskrit, Avalokiteshvara. Because Chenrezig means actually the one who looks, the one who is looking and caring for, you know. But also looking means that he is also aware. There is this notion of awareness. So it's a sort of a mixture or a blending or a combination of awareness and compassion and good heart and sort of basic goodness. But it's a basic goodness that is totally aware. So by this you can immediately, I think since we all have it in ourselves, just sometimes just by evoking what it represents, it's sort of, it's there, you know, it's there. So also the way he's seated, that's also true with the image of the Buddha. The way he's seated, the way all the ornaments and everything immediately convey a sense of, you know, in one sense of dignity, you know, but also a presence and a very, and also some just a very dignified and warm feeling. The more you get used to it, of course, in the beginning, it's a bit out of our culture, isn't it? But in a sense, I think this is a good thing. Because if he was just wearing a tie and sitting in a chair and looking at his telephone or something like this, it would be too ordinary. And it would have lots of references to, you know, relative references to our daily life, and it wouldn't convey the same sort of meaning. I'm not saying that someone who wears a tie and is dressed with a suit and looking at his smartphone cannot be an enlightened being. Of course he can, but I mean probably for us it won't have the same impact than by seeing something which is not connected with anything from our relative reality and from our modern world. Some people, I've heard some people wanting to change a few things in Buddhism to be, like for instance the mandala offering or things like this, the model of the universe, which was the model of Indian at the Buddha's time and things like this. But I think maybe it's not necessary. Anyway, in this case and what we are talking about, you can see there is lots of things that are unusual. You don't see many people wearing this sort of clothes, even in London. We do see people wearing strange things in London, but I've never seen anyone wearing this sort of clothes in the tube. Wouldn't be very practical. Anyway, so I don't know. So far, anyone has any question or wants to say something, ask something?
With all the different views, I always saw Avalokiteshvara and Chenrezig. I was in another tradition before, and they would say that, and then now there's Chenrezig, and I kind of thought, I think it's the same guy.
It is.
So I didn't realise, and also because I'm interested in this Buddha, they have Kuan Yin in
Yeah.
It's all different names. It's just the different cultures and
Yes.
yeah.
In the Chinese and Japanese tradition, they have it's hardly one of their own deity. They only have one deity, I think, and it's Kuan Yin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
And Kuan Yin is Chenrezig. Yeah, it's the same,
Okay.
except for them, they saw it as a feminine figure.
Yeah, so I know.
Yeah.
They have the 100 arms.
There is also a Avalokiteshvara with 1,000 arms.
1,000
Yeah,
arms.
1,000 arms. It's a lot of arms. You only see the little hands. You
They
know.
say the Kuan Yin, I think, or I don't know, that they say about them. I can't remember the story. She or he, she came from the tear of.
That's Tara.
Is it Tara?
Tara comes from a tear of Chenrezig.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He looked at the world and he saw so many people suffering.
Oh, okay.
Then he had, tears rolling down his face, and
Yeah.
one tear became green Tara and the other tear became white Tara.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the story. Yeah, then there are lots of stories and things like this, but yeah, I think the idea is trying to connect with our basic goodness through compassion, through Chenrezig, using Chenrezig as a skillful means for that. Yes?
Probably a silly question. You talk about
Silly.
arms and that,
Yeah.
but so why
What
have they got 4 arms? And then sort of like you said, so many arms. What reason?
Yeah. Wouldn't it be practical?
Shopping.
But there's a good reason for it. We did this prayer when we were before starting, of the 4 boundless. Okay? So actually, these 4 boundless thoughts, feelings, or, wishing the love, which is defined as the wish well, here it's as a wish that may everybody be happy and have the causes of happiness. That's considered to be love. Then compassion, everybody be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Then joy, may everybody really be tuned into the perfect joy that has no opposite, cannot become sadness. It's just the joy, beyond the joy of our true nature. And then equanimity, may everybody not make so much difference between friends and enemies, and also between himself and others. So when you combine these 4 feelings, or these 4 aspects, you get to the basic goodness, let's say it, or Buddha nature, which is our own. So there are 4, isn't it? So the 4 arms of Chenrezig actually represent these 4 boundless. Okay? The arm with the lotus represents love, because our love should be the lotus in the Eastern tradition is considered as a symbol of purity, because lotus grow in ponds, and their roots are in the middle of the things that often don't smell so good, and then the what do you call this? they grow up above the surface of the water. You know, lotus are not those flowers that are on the surface of water. That's lilies or something.
Yeah.
We often confuse them. But if you have been to a tropical country or in India or something, you'll see that lotus is a totally different flower. It grows high above. It can be my size, you know, and the flower is in the top, and then it swings very elegantly with the wind. It's very beautiful. So it's the symbol of purity because it grows from whatever is really muddy and, you know, smelly and all that, and then it grows into a very beautiful flower, totally pure and not tainted by all this mud where it grows from. So, so that is the symbol of love which is totally pure. Then on the right hand, he has a mala, crystal mala, and that is the symbol of equanimity, because every bead in the mala is crossed by the same string in the same way. So it means there is no difference. There are not better beads than others. They're all the same. So that's the feeling of, you know, you love everybody in the same way. Or at least you wish well. I mean, perhaps it's difficult for us to, at this point, imagine that we can love our enemies as we love our children, for instance. But that's, I mean, when you are free from duality, that's how you feel. There is no difference. You just wish well to everybody. And then the two other hands, which are, you know, like folded, they are holding something actually. You might not perceive it from where you are, but it's there was in the Indian mythology something called wish-fulfilling gem, which was supposed to be a gem, which a jewel, a jewel that would fulfill all your wishes, and it was very highly considered, as you might imagine, something that can fulfill our wishes. So he's holding it in his two folded hands. Meaning that actually this, what he represents, you know, this basic goodness of ours is a wish-fulfilling jewel. All the wishes that we may have get fulfilled once you have this attitude. Of course, once you embody basic goodness, you won't wish bad things. So it's not all your wishes are realized because you just wish wonderful things. And those two hands are the two left ones, joy and compassion. So you have love, joy, compassion and equanimity. That's why we have 4 hands. While in the case of 1,000 arms, then it's different. It has lots of, it has 8 main arms with different attributes. And just by a strange coincidence, or auspicious coincidence, last Sunday I was in the south of France receiving an empowerment of 1,000 armed Chenrezig. It's funny, eh? It was really a coincidence because it was in the program since a long time, but I didn't know I was coming here just the week after. You know? So and then all the other arms have no attributes. They just have a small eye in the palm of the hand because it's supposed to be Chenrezig. I mean, the one who is looking, so the one who is sort of aware and taking care. You know? But then he has also many heads. That's much more complicated. We have a simpler form, but everything is there. It's just different symbols. So that explains the 4 arms. And it's important to know because once you sort of visualize it, then you know that what it means, and that helps to find the feeling. You know? Then all the ornaments also, like the jewel ornaments, like the crown, the different necklaces, the earrings, and the bracelets, and also in the wrists and in the elbows and also in the feet and everything, are considered as being the different ornaments or qualities of this deity. It's a very common. There are different levels of deities. Deities from now a few difficult words: Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, which are all different levels. I think I won't explain that today, but different levels. Dharmakaya is sort of the absolute space or the absolute body. It's Kaya means body, so Dharmakaya is sort of the absolute body, and Sambhogakaya is called the fruition or the enjoyment, perfect enjoyment body, and then Nirmanakaya is just the illusory Kaya, or means actually refers to actual people, like the Buddha, for instance, is a Nirmanakaya. Guru Rinpoche is a Nirmanakaya because they actually existed. They were like in our world. And then the Sambhogakaya, they're all dressed in the same way. If you look Tara or Manjushri, or more or less, sometimes they have different, just slight differences, but they're all dressed in what seems to have been the Indian fashion, the Indian royal fashion at some point. And so they are wearing all these silk ornaments and golden golden ornaments, which actually represent all the qualities. It's like an ornament. So it means that once you find, or once you are in touch or become that awareness and compassion together, then you have all sorts of qualities that radiate and that are present in your way of being. So it is really actually a state of being. It's not really an entity or someone, but a state of being that comes from our true nature. So, and the fact that we can visualize or relate to this form tunes us into something. And also, I think why we might say, but why keep this image, or why this image that sometimes may seem very alien to us? The fact that so many people for so many centuries, took this form as being the embodiment of compassion, creates something, makes it easier for us to connect with the meaning or with the energy of this image, instead of just creating something totally out of nowhere. It instantly, sort of subtly, in a very subtle way, links us to all those hundreds and thousands of people who have practiced in this same way. Okay, questions? Yeah.
Could you explain the deer skin? Because some people see that and think, oh my God, it's got a deer skin on it. That's not very nice, but if the symbolism isn't understood, it can be a bit of a misunderstanding.
Brigitte Bardot may not find it very nice, I know. Yeah, it has puzzled me also, They often have that. You have to know that it is guaranteed that the deer died of natural death. No, it's a symbol, because I don't know if you know, but when Buddha gave his first teaching, It was in a place called Rishipatana, near Benares, was known to be the deer park, because there were lots of deers there. And so because of that, and because of deers being such a sweet animal, with very soft eyes and, Bambi. There's for a reason, It's because it's so, it gives a soft feeling, So the deer became the symbol of Buddhism. You have perhaps seen in some monasteries the wheel of Dharma with two deers, one on each side. And so the deer skin here represents this sort of sweetness. But for us now, it probably didn't feel the same way for Tibetans in the past.
Do you think it's like a cloak? There's something, the clouds cloak the mountain or something. Is it like a... Do you know...
The deer skin is here.
Isn't it? On the shoulder.
It's here, yeah.
Yeah.
He wears it like this,
Okay.
Not really, not on the shoulders, but like this. And it's, it's a symbol of something very soft and sweet and loving. But it's strange. For us, it looks a little bit strange. Yeah, I know. But it appears in other contexts. Sometimes other, like Tangtong Gyalpo, for instance, and there's it also appears in with other siddhas or yogis. They're sitting on a deer skin and a cushion, and then covered with the deer skin, because it's this symbol of But I'm sure it doesn't mean that they have been hunting or anything like that. It died of natural death. Yeah.
Or the disco, is it the moon or?
Well, in this specific tanka, he has just aura. But in the sadhana, yes, they say he is sort of, his back is leaning against a disc, a moon disc. Because sun and moon, are very used. All these things are very symbolic. Like he's sitting on a throne made of a lotus, which means, which also symbolizes purity. So this is supposed to mean that this compassion is pure, not ours, not like ours. Is a totally pure in the sense that it is not taken over by duality and ego clinging and all that stuff. So it's a pure feeling of compassion, and to symbolize that, he is sitting on a lotus, and then on the top of the lotus there is a moon disc, flat. So he's sitting on that. So there is a lotus and then moon disc, and Chenrezig is sitting on the top of it. And the moon, there is all this symbolic. You can see up there, sun and moon in the top of the tanka. And it's the symbol, sun being the symbol of a more active principle, and then the moon being, sun.
Is it a little like yin and yang?
Yeah, exactly. So because this is a very soft and sweet energy, it's more like the moon. The moon doesn't really have UV. You don't become
Moonburn.
yeah, moonburn, exactly. Because the light is very sweet and soft, but at the same time can be very bright. If it's a full moon's night, you can see almost like in the daytime. But the light is very fresh, it's not burning. So That's why it's to symbolize that this energy is something very warm, but at the same time it's not burning or anything. It's something sweet and
I think also it's like the full moon, when you have the full moon, they say about the high tide and things like that. Is that something also to do with the water, do you think?
oh, the water is
because you're in the water and the lotus.
the water is because it's normally there because of the lotus being born in the water. So there's always water. Quite often there is water because of to explain that why the lotus is there.
Is that the Himalayas behind? Is that the Himalayas behind?
Might be, yeah. This all these images are they have a strict proportion. They build a grid of very precise. So there are not many artists. They don't have much freedom to do whatever they want, except for the landscape.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
So that's where they sort of express themselves. It's just the opposite of our idea of art. In our idea of art, artists should do whatever they feel like, But in this sort of art, because it's not just to express your own ideas, it's meant to be a tool for meditation. If you don't follow the exact proportions and things like this, then you won't get the same feeling. And it's very common that, Westerner artists that, for instance, try to make nice faces and very beautiful. But the Eastern artists don't care so much about that. Sometimes you see really, you shouldn't, apparently, they say in the teachings one shouldn't say this, but sometimes they're really ugly. But it doesn't care, it doesn't matter, in a sense. For us, perhaps, but for them it doesn't. But this one is very beautiful, and I think it was probably painted by a Westerner or something. It doesn't really feel too much Tibetan, but it's beautiful. It's harmonious. It has a very sweet face, really.
So do you think that's still got the proportions right, though?
The proportions are right,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
It's just the face that doesn't really feel too much Tibetan. But the proportions are, totally right. The fact that the proportions and the colors, they also have a little bit freedom in the colors they put in the silk ornaments and things like this. And even the aura can also have different colors. But it's quite limited. They can't do whatever they want to, except they can put the landscape in different ways, like with animals, or it depends, and you can find different things. No input is detected. Yes. I don't know if you want to have a break. Perhaps it would be the right time to have a cup of tea, and then we go on and look a little bit to the text, into the text. So this was more a general overview. Exactly. Thank you.